the vent settings for the Captain 6, 8, and 10. So I rattled those all off, but it's actually the same software runs in this box and the next size bigger boxes, and maybe sometime in the future we'll have bigger than 10. So that the 6, 8, 10, that stands for how many relay outputs. And I personally wrote this software, and I'll go over the settings in it so you can understand what you can all do with your vents. So P100 through 110 is what that means. So all the perimeters are labeled P101 through, or actually P0 through 1,000 some total. And the open temperature for vent 1 through 10. So P101 is your open temperature for vent 1. So you might have 3 vents. Vent 1 is going to be P101 and the default 60 degrees. You can change that to anything you want. You go all the way down to 1 degree or up to probably about 120 if you really want, which would be kind of dumb. But you can set that wherever you want for vent 1. Then for vent 2, it would be P102. Vent 3 would be P103. And you each have your setting for each one of those. They're each unique. You can run them. Each have their own set point. And it'll only show the ones your system is set up for. If you don't have any vents, or only have one vent, only P101 will show up. The rest won't, because they're not enabled. And that's another video on how to enable different apps. So here we got the vents diff 1 temperature. So you can have different temperatures throughout the day. It's called temperature diffs. You have your normal, which this would be, and you have diff 1 and diff 2. So you have 3 sets of settings, so that in the morning when the sun's coming up, you can drop actually what you do is you raise the temperature in your greenhouse, or turn your furnace on and open the vents and get a bunch of the heat out of there. And you do that by using diff 1, diff 2, and shifting all your set points up for a couple minutes. So each vent will have its own diff 1 temperature if you have diff 1 enabled. If you have diff 2 enabled, each vent will have its own diff temperature. The diff 2s is P21, 22, P122, 123, 124, however many vents you've got. Since I wrote this software we want to run bigger units someday, the set point we'll be able to go up to 10 at some point. So here's the run seconds. Vent 1 through 10's run seconds, which actually P31, P131 is vent 1's run seconds. P132 is vent 2's run seconds. So the vents, they run for a couple seconds, and then you leave them wait a couple minutes for the temperatures to all even out. Then you run again. So it runs a little bit, waits a while, runs a little bit, waits a while. So that's the run seconds, and then this is the pause minute. Every vent has its own pause minutes. Every vent has its own run seconds. You can set the whole thing, each one up individually, just so that you can cater to your system, to your greenhouse, just exactly like you want, to try to get things to move just to keep your temperatures real even. And then the temperature gap. Every vent can have its own gap between open and close. Every curtain has its own unique setting, or every vent has its own unique setting, so that you can keep your greenhouse dead on. Like maybe you want maybe one of them hunts too much, you make that gap a little bit bigger, but the vent up your roof vent, you'll keep that one real tight so that you can keep your temperatures dead on. And here we go into humidity. So if you have a humidity sensor hooked up, if it gets above a certain, your P170, vent motor's maximum humidity. So whenever the humidity gets above that, it'll just run for a couple seconds, and you can set that. 171 sets how many seconds it runs. P172 is that's kind of a kill temperature. If it's below freezing, don't open in here. And you can set that to whatever you want. And then 173 is which vent's used for humidity. So on this system, only one vent can turn on from the humidity or open from the humidity. I'm sorry. You can turn fans on. That's a separate story. But for the vents, one vent can open for humidity. You say, why only one? It's because in the winter time and it's too moist, you open a vent so much and bam, it cools off. The moisture drops quick. It only takes one vent to open a little bit, and that's why you set how many seconds open, because it opens up and then the humidity drops and then it will close again. So you've got to, we're often talking 10 seconds or so. You open that vent up and the moisture just leaves right like that. So those are the settings for the temperature and the humidity for the vents. There's also, here's the rest of them. Here's the open sequence for the rain and the wind. there's a wind speed. The vents can also close when it gets too windy, or if it's raining, and you can make them. So if you had 3 vents, you can make them shut in whichever sequence you want, because you don't want them colliding with each other. So this sets a sequence, and this is how long it takes a vent to close the whole way. P191. So when it's raining, you want all the vents to shut, and they take turns closing so they don't bam into each other if one's above kind of overlaps the other. So that's what these are all about. And P201 is which vents should close when it's windy. Maybe you only want your roof vent to shut, or maybe you just want everything to shut. It's up to you. And P202 is your high wind mile per hour, and your basically the wind override clear is your low mile per hour. So it got to 200 miles an hour, and then you want to close down. Actually, when it gets to 30 miles an hour, you want to close down the override clear. That means once it gets down, it was at 30 and now it's down to 15. All is clear, and they'll start opening again. So this is like that. The further apart you keep those numbers, the less bounce you'll have when the wind's going woom, 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 woom. And that is all the vent perimeters, and they really make sense and they do work. So if you got any questions, give us a holler, like us here on YouTube, so we keep making more of these because it's fun.